course, it's nighttime, and they had like a kerosene. Give me a break. They had a kerosene lamp, and there was a guy. I mean, he had a goatee, I'd say about 60 years old, and had we call him Soupy Sales. He had his hat on like this. Well, and the guy next to him was a soldier, about 27 years old, and he was doing all the talking. So he says, you know, what's your name? I tell him. How old are you? I tell him. He says, what city are you from? He says, well, I'd like to answer that, but my government will not let me. She says, if you don't answer the question, I'm going to have my guards take you out and shoot you. Well, you know, we were told if you're caught in North Vietnam, they try to get you to Hanoi. If you're caught in South Vietnam, not so much. So I didn't really think he'd shoot me, but, you know, you don't know. So we go through this about 3 times, and finally he says, okay, now I'm going to have my guards take you out and garrote you. So I'm thinking, you know, James Bond, From Russia with Love, piano wire around the neck, all that stuff. Well, their idea of garroting is they put you on the knees, and there was a desk in front of me with those 2 guys, and they'll take a bamboo rope, just about the size of my little finger, and they tie it right above the elbows, and they cinch it down, both elbows, right to the bone. I mean, we're talking about the size of a nickel. And, you know, I did judo, I boxed, I played football, played hockey for a year. In those sports, when you get popped, you know, it hurts and then it goes away. Well, this was constant. It was like white-hot barbed wire going through you. And pretty soon I said, you know, I'm not going to be able to handle this. I got to find a way to knock myself out. Well, I said, okay, if I fall forward on the desk and hit my head, I'll knock myself out and everything will be cool. So I did that. Trouble is, that just made me more alert. And so the soldier, he comes back and he, you know, I've got tears coming down. He pulls my head back, and throughout that, I heard this collective groan. And I look over in the shadows, and here's his family. There's about 25 Vietnamese. I mean, you got mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, aunts, uncles. I was their entertainment that night. Just amazing. So he pulls me back, you know, and I'm. I don't know what to do. I'm down there, you know, and I'm looking down, and I don't know how long this thing took. It could have been 20 minutes. It could have been 2 hours. The longest I heard anybody ever handling that is about 2 hours. I question that. I'm sure mine was closer to 20 minutes. But my arms are purple. They are as purple as, they're more purple than that tent. I mean, it's a dark purple. And the soldier comes over and he whispers in my ear, he says, you know, he says, if you don't talk pretty soon, your arms are going to fall off. I have to tell you, that bothered me. Well, I'm still hanging in there, and I have no idea of how many more minutes, but all of a sudden my body started to convulse. And I couldn't control it, and this scream, my muscles are just going like that, and the scream comes out. At the top of my lungs, I scream, I will never talk. And about 5 minutes later, I says, look, you guys untie this stuff, and I'll tell you anything you want to know. Well, they untie it, stands me up, turns me around, he says, okay, Robert, they like to call me Robert. He says, Robert, what city are you from? I says, Cleveland, Ohio. He says, okay, Robert, now you may go to sleep. So they hog-tied me to a board, and I slept that night. And the next morning I hear some shuffling, and people are sitting down, you know, and I hear this, oh, now you are my prisoner. I know, this will be great. And they stand me up, untie me, and it's the desk, and it's the old guy, Soupy Sales, you know. By himself, he talks English. And we start talking, he says, oh, Cleveland, he says, what do you think of the Cleveland Indians? Oh, I don't know, they're not very good this year. And he talks about all this, you know, how many children? He says, oh, I just got married, I have no children. He says, oh, I have one. I found out later, no matter how many children you had, the interrogator always had one more. And we're talking about this soft stuff. And then he says, well, what are your dive angles? I said, I says, you know, I'd love to answer that question, but my government will not let me do that. He says, do you remember what happened last night? I says, yes, I do. He says, what are your dive angles? I says, oh, anywhere from 0 degrees to 90 degrees. Oh, what do you think about the Cleveland Browns? He just keeps on going. You know, I think they just wanted me to talk. We went through that drill probably for a week, and then they tossed me into a truck with another fellow who turned out to be my first roommate, Mike McCustian. Mike, he's a funny guy. He said, man, he said, best airplane I ever flew. He flew the F-105. He says, the best airplane I ever flew, I only got 7 missions. Anyway, so we're in the truck. It took us 4 days to get to Hanoi. We travel at night, and we'd stay in the village during the daytime. And one of those nights, we got bombed by our own airplanes, and it was unbelievable. I mean, usually when you hear the planes, the trucks would stop, the lights would go out. Well, this time we could hear the airplanes, and the trucks are keeping going. We had 6 guards in the back, and they're getting real nervous. They start pounding on the back of the cab and the side. Finally, the truck stops. There's airplanes, there's bombs, there's rockets, there's 37 millimeter, and the truck stops, the guards boogie. Mike and I, we're chained to each other with a big chain, and we're just hunkering down. And we had some planes coming over us about 200 feet. I didn't think we had planes that could do that at night. And I'm looking out to the west, you know, through my blindfold, and the whole western sky was nothing but those 37 millimeter orange balls, and they're going away. And the sky, I mean, there was thousands of them. And, you know, for every one of those, there's 4 more behind it. That had to be the best fireworks show I ever saw or ever will see. Anyway, we survived. I estimate that if I had to make the trip 4 times, I wouldn't make it one of those times. So we get to Hanoi. We get to Hanoi on the 19th, and they couldn't get to me up there because we had a lot of bombing raids and all that stuff. And they finally put me into a cell that was about 20 feet high, dirty whitewashed walls. And he said, don't take off your blindfold. Well, I did, and I wish I had because it was really depressing. Well, now my next interrogation, a guy named Crooked Eye. The Vietnamese, they don't have glasses. I mean, they look at you, one eye's going this way, the other one's heading out that way. You know, just amazing. And he starts asking me questions, and he says, how many missions? I says, well, you know, I had 90. I didn't want to brag that I had 134. And he says, no, he says, not enough. Now you'll be punished. So he sent me back to my room, cell, and he puts me in the leg stocks, but he crosses my legs. So it didn't hurt, except when you roll over to try to go to sleep, your big toe grinds into the concrete. And I didn't get any sleep. So the next morning, the flap opens, talk. He takes me there again. He says, how many missions? I says, 90. He goes right on to something else. He asked me 6 questions. I lied about all of them. One of them was, how many destroyers you have in the coast? Well, we had 3 identification. We check in and check out, friend or foe. And I said, we have 100. And he asked me a bunch of other questions. I lie about all of them. Finally, he says, you lied. He slams his book shut, and I had this really sick feeling in my stomach. Well, this time he gets his guards, and they have manacles. It's not like the law enforcement where you have handcuffs with a chain in between. It's manacles. A figure 8, they put down, and they screw it down behind your back. And then he takes a parachute shroud tape, and he ties my elbows till they touch. Well, you can't breathe, and it really hurts a lot up in your shoulders. And he slams a broom into my mouth and says, don't cry, and they walk out. He says, man, you know, I can't handle this, and he's going to be back in 20 minutes, he'll be back in a day, you know. Well, 20 minutes later, they come back in, he undoes it, and sits me on the stool. He says, why did you lie? I says, because I'm stupid. Well, so he opens his book and he goes through the 6 questions. He had the 6 correct answers. And one of the questions, which was identification, friend or foe, transponder, frequency. We didn't have this my first cruise, but we had it my second. I said, well, this is new stuff. These guys are not going to know about this. And so I gave him a bogus frequency. Well, I can't remember the frequency now, but he had the right answer to those 6 questions, and to that frequency question, he knew the frequency to the decimal point. these guys knew everything. Anyway, well, that was pretty much the extent. I got my first roommate on the 1st of June, was Mike McCustian. And the next 3 years we spent in a room anywhere from 12 by 12 to 15, well, 12 by 12 to 15 by 15 with 2 or 3 other roommates. Unbelievably boring. I mean, I'm counting the squares on the ceiling, you know. And then the last 3 years, they put us in a compound in July of 1970. And I started getting letters I hadn't written for 3 years. I get letters every 3 months, packages every other month. We're getting outside about 6 hours a day. That first 2.5 years, we get outside like an hour a day. I pretty much describe my treatment. Some people don't like to hear this. The first 2 months were a nightmare. The last 3 years were a country club. The 2.5 years in between was like law school. Your basic miserable existence. That's pretty much my story. I don't think we want to do questions, but I do have a couple things I'd like to share with you. Mike McCustian, he's a pretty tough guy, funny guy. He played golf with Jack Nicklaus. He went to school in Lincoln, University of Nebraska. Great guy. But they got him wrapped up like they had me, with my hands manacled behind my back, the elbows tied. He's not talking. So this is what can happen to you. They put shackles over his ankles, you know, the horseshoe shape, and they run this 10-foot bar through him. And then they take another parachute shroud and they tie his wrists, come over the shoulder, wrap it around the bar, back over this other shoulder, back to the wrist, and then they cinched him up till his nose touched his toes, you know. He's still not talking. And old Crooked Eye was looking at him, he says, and you know, Mike's lying there like this, and he's got tears coming down his eyes. And Crooked Eye says, just think, Cushion, they like to call him Cushion.